Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss The Muppets Take Manhattan, starring the Muppets you love and directed by Frank Oz. Now, I've never seen this movie, but there's a couple things I looked up and see that will be in the future in a commercial. Let's talk about it in the movie, shall we? The Muppets performed their new musical at a college called College in somewhere, and the play is called Manhattan Melodies. And after they finish performing the song together again, Kermit the Frog is told by an audience member to take the show on to Broadway. Where is the best place for Broadway? Manhattan, which happens to be in New York City. Ed Scooter the Gopher gets the idea of taking it to Broadway in Manhattan, while Kermit believes the script is needing more work and decides to go to Broadway in Manhattan. And they get there and meet a Broadway producer named Martin Price, aka Murray Plotsky, cameoed by Daphne Coleman, whom I've seen him in a lot of things. Well, maybe a couple. Like, he was the police captain in Inspector Gadget, the Matthew Broderick one, as well as there was a movie I saw a long time ago where he's like a cop. I forget the name of it, but anyways, after seeing him in the newspaper and they go in his office, and he almost puts the Muppets on Broadway as he has to rent a theater for $300, and they don't have the money for it, and learn that he's a bad man, while the animal attacks him and calls him Bad Man! Bad Man! While holding the Great Gonzo and Camilla the chicken hostage. And the humor in this is cracking me up, as this is so far the best Muppet movie in my opinion as far as cracking me up goes. The Muppets go into one of the offices, at one office after another, as they audition and get their door closed in front of their faces too many times, while they're saying they can't take no for an answer, as they have a hard time getting into Broadway while in Manhattan, as Kermit is always asked what to do. Next, he believes they're failing, and they go to eat at a diner while Kermit meets Jenny, coming into work late, and Kermit explains to the owner of the diner, Pete, how broke they are, and meets as well as his chats with Jenny. While the Muppets decide to split up and tell Kermit they have no choice but to split up from one another, even Fozzie Bear and Miss Piggy. And I feel super sorry for Kermit because I was afraid he will live like a homeless frog. And I really do like relating with the Muppets in this movie. The Muppets say goodbye to one another, and while Kermit feels shame and walks into the Empire State Building and looks on the edge and decides to get them back and put them on Broadway and tells New York, while Miss Piggy for some reason sticks around, as it was obvious. And next day comes as Kermit comes to the diner, back to the diner, I mean, and wants a part-time job and asks Pete, and he reluctantly accepts Kermit doing dishes as a job thanks to Jenny, as Jenny wants to be a fashion designer, and talks with Kermit about the Broadway show and disguises himself as he knows a theater agent named Lenny and gives him the script to his show, and Lenny right away throws away the script as it's hard to live. It's a hard life to live. And I like Kermit's chances, as this movie works pretty good for a Muppet movie. Kermit talks with Jenny and compliments her while Miss Piggy is hit on by some construction workers, and they back off after seeing Miss Piggy bending and acting violently. And Miss Piggy gets back to work and gets fired as she wears a makeup job by her work, and as her coworker puts it on her and makes her look pretty. And that scene was pretty funny, while Pete has Rizzle the Rat, as well as other rats, work for him as they dance and infect customers' food, while Kermit gets a letter from Scooter as he works in a movie theater in Ohio as he gives out 3D glasses for a particular movie, while Fozzie is in Maine and can't sleep as he lives with Beth and other bears. And Dr. Teeth lives in Pittsburgh with his band as well as Animal. And the script for this movie is cute. Miss Piggy watches Kermit, and Jenny asks her to draw him a mustache as he goes in a fancy restaurant and brings Rizzo and the rats into the restaurant as they eat people's food because they're starving, and scares the customers away, and the rats run out, and the manager sees a painting replaced and throws Kermit out of the restaurant, which is a pretty funny scene as they talk under other people's tables, and they recognize Kermit as big time producer, which is a clever. Meanwhile, Miss Piggy watches Kermit and Jenny jogging in Central Park as Miss Piggy runs out of breath and at one point gets her purse stolen by a thief and borrows a skater's roller skates to go after the thief as Miss Piggy catches up to him, and she and Kermit argue over after Jenny left about how she lied to him about being out of town, and the skater comes back for his skates and asks Miss Piggy if she's been spying on her, and explains how friends don't spy on each other, and the skater tells Miss Piggy to keep the skates and takes her on rides, and Kermit takes her on a ride with some horses in Manhattan. Looks good for 1984. Miss Piggy imagines as she met Kermit as babies, as well as the other Muppets. And here's something I found out as there's a show I've seen many years ago that came out the same year as this movie called Muppet Babies. That was an animated show. And that's a show I remember watching as a kid and found it charming. So I was getting callbacks from that show. And fun fact, it came out the same year as this movie came out in 1984, which is an interesting fun fact because I wasn't alive then, but I remember watching Muppet Babies as a kid. And the ride finishes and they go back to Pete's, and Miss Piggy gets a job as a waitress there and gets interrupted by letters while serving Brooke Shields as they read the letter from the Muppets, like Gonzo is in Michigan, along with Camilla and his chickens, and they perform the Lone Ranger's theme song, and Rolf works with dogs in a veterinarian in Delaware, where he takes care of Snooky as the other dogs tease her, and that was cute, as this movie is cute at best. Kermit gets a letter from a big Broadway producer named Bernard Crawford and meets his son Ronnie as he substitutes as Bernard, and Ronnie wants to produce Kermit's show, Manhattan Melodies, and says they're going to produce the show on Broadway, and calls Jenny and Miss Piggy, and she gets to be a star until at some point Kermit gets ran over by a taxi cab, and Jenny and Miss Piggy wait for Pete for Kermit, as Miss Piggy is worried about Kermit, and Lenny comes to the restaurant and says their show starts in 2 weeks, and the Muppets learn they're going to Broadway and comes back to New York City while Kermit is in the hospital and doesn't remember anything about what happened to him, as he has amnesia and doesn't recognize Jenny, Miss Piggy, and his other Muppet friends as he becomes a complete different person named Phil. And so far, I'm entertained by the movie thus far, as it's cute in the most entertaining way possible. Kermit gets a job with other frogs, who loves his idea, while Ronnie wants the Muppets to study their songs, as well as look for Kermit, and they look for him for 2 weeks until opening night comes, and Kermit and Phil, as Phil comes into Pete's diner and makes music from a cup, and the Muppets see him and with his new friends, as Kermit doesn't recognize his friends, and this is clever in the most awkward word possible. Opening night is here, and Kermit doesn't remember a thing about who the Muppets are, as Miss Piggy begs him to remember as she brings up how they get married, and he laughs about it, and she karate chops Kermit, and he suddenly remembers everything. As Kermit sings a song from a commercial I remember from, I believe, a decade ago, where they go, I forgot the words, but it was a commercial. I remember the song, as they perform the show with new bears amongst others, and Kermit and Miss Piggy get married with the cameos by the Sesame Street characters, and Kermit, when asked, would you take Miss Piggy as his longly wedded wife, and he pauses for a while as he hesitates until he says I do, as it sounds like he wasn't ready yet, which is typical Kermit. And I honestly thought he was going to say I don't, but they get married anyway, so thank goodness for that, excuse me. Whew. And the climax was cute and beautiful, but how cute was this movie? Let's get to the rating and find out, shall we? I'll give this movie a 7.5 out of 10. This may be the best Muppet movie in my opinion, as the humor was cracking me up from start to finish, as I really like and relate with the Muppets, as I felt pity for Kermit at one point in the beginning of the movie, as it works pretty good for a Muppet movie. The movie is pretty funny, and the songs are good, as I was getting callbacks from a commercial I remember seeing a long time ago, like a decade I'll say, as well as callbacks from the Muppet Babies, as that came out in 1984. This movie is cute and absolutely entertaining, and it's entertaining me throughout. Miss Piggy once again makes me laugh throughout the movie, and some of animal scenes are funny to me, and the lines are clever, and the Muppets work is once again and the Muppet work is once again great in this movie, as this is a recommendation for this movie. And there were better cameos from characters like the Sesame Street characters and Daphne Coleman, for example. And at the end of the day, this was a cute movie. So I would like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with Muppet Treasure Island. And until then,